Open your Bibles to Mark chapter 9. It's awesome to be with you all. The 1-year anniversary of Great Oaks. It is incredible. A year ago, the first Sunday of October, we launched, and here we are, 1 year later on October 5th. It really is amazing. And so today is a huge celebration of everything that we've gotten to see God do in the past year. If we haven't gotten the chance to meet yet, my name is Stephen, and I'm one of the pastors here, and we're so grateful that you are joining us today. This past year, we've seen God do so many incredible things. We saw 16 adults be baptized, which is incredible. We've seen, we can celebrate that. We've seen friendships started and people grow in their relationship with Christ through connection groups and equipping and men's and women's ministries. We've seen 22 kids jump into Family Week back in August, and so many of you loving on those kids and families. We've seen a lot of really cool things. On the Salt Company side, we saw 60 students go to the conference last fall and then last spring and then come back, ready to have an impact on their campus. And just this last Thursday night, there were 275 college students in this room. Is that insane? It has been mind-blowing. When people ask me, hey, Stephen, how is year one gone? I just say, it has exceeded our expectations. It really has. Everything that we've gotten to see ministry-wise and as a church has exceeded my expectations. And so today's a celebration because it's, oh my word, look at all that God has done. But it also fills us with anticipation. If he could do that in 1 year, imagine what he could do over 5, over 10, over 20. And so it's a really fun day that both celebrates what we've seen and also looks forward to what's to come. And this past year, we haven't just seen God work in the exciting moments, but we have seen God work in the challenging moments. So many of our key families and key leaders have gone through some really, really trying and difficult times. And in each of those situations, we've seen evidences of grace and God being faithful to be present and to provide in those. And so we've seen him provide in cool ways and exciting ways, but we've also seen him be near to us as a church through some real challenges. And so today is not just a celebration of all the cool things we've seen. It's also a celebration of God's undying faithfulness that we've seen time and time again in the last year, which is incredible. And not only, like Mason said, is it a celebration of God's faithfulness, it is a celebration of you, of us. Just to step back and be grateful for one another. Again, and like Mason said, not to toot our own horn or pat ourselves on the back necessarily, but just to stop and say, God has used each of you in a unique way. The people in this room have made some significant sacrifices over the last year. Sacrificing time, sacrificing energy and abilities to jump onto serve teams and to bless our church. Sacrificing finances to help generously get us started as a church. And so I just want to also say it is a celebration of the people in this room and how you've allowed God to use you this past year. So, like I said, today is a celebration and it fills us with anticipation of what God is going to do. Now, why did we, if you were to rewind the clock a year and a half, 2 years ago, and we put October 6, 2024 on the calendar, why did we pick that date? Well, I had a lot of strategic and pragmatic reasons, but if you really pressed me on, hey, why October 6th? It's because I wanted every once in a while Great Oaks' birthday to land on 10/2, October 2nd. Now, if you've been around our church for the past year, hopefully you've come to realize that Luke 10:2 is a significant verse for us. That's kind of a North Star for our church and our family of churches in the SALT network. And what I wanted to do with Great Oaks' birthday is forever embed the 10:02 vision in this church. That Jesus went to his disciples and said, hey, the harvest is abundant. The laborers are few. Therefore, pray to the Lord of the harvest to raise up more laborers to go out. And so what today is to celebrate, hey, we've already seen how Great Oaks has been an answer to that Luke 10:2 prayer. And we also want to be reminded, let's keep praying that. Let's keep being faithful to step into the ways that God's called us as a church to raise up more laborers to go into a world that is ready to hear the good news. Here in Mankato, here in our country, and beyond. So, thank you for being a part of this last year, and thank you for celebrating today our 1-year anniversary. And we're excited to see how you will be a part of what God is going to continue to do and how he uses this church. Well, we are in Mark 9 this morning, and let me start with a question as we turn there. Have you ever noticed that we as humans love sneak peeks, trailers, appetizers, taste tests in the kitchen? We love them. We love teasers. I saw this at my first McComas family Christmas. That is Natalie's family, my wife. My in-laws happened to be here. Don't worry, Ellen, I'm not going to embarrass you. I show up to my first McComas family Christmas, and it's Christmas Eve, and Natalie and all of her sisters say, hey, let's open a present. And I think, what? No, you can't open presents. Like, they'll all get taken away. Like, isn't that what Santa does? If you open the presents, he takes them away. I don't know. But I was nervous. And they're like, no. Our family opens one present the night before Christmas. And so we open a present, and it gets you what? It gets you excited to open the rest of them. Why do the McComases open a Christmas present the night before? Why do we love movie trailers? Why do we love teasers? Why do we love taste tests in the kitchen? It's because a small glimpse, a preview, fills us with anticipation for what is to come. It actually helps us enjoy the full thing later. Experiencing something in small doses prepares us to enjoy the full thing. Opening one present gets us ready to open the rest. What we're going to see this morning in Mark chapter 9 is a movie trailer, a preview. The disciples are with Jesus, and they get a glimpse, a taste test. And what they get a taste test of is Jesus' glory. They get a sneak peek into Jesus' glory. At this point in the narrative, Jesus' disciples have identified him as the Messiah, the Christ. They know that he's the Messiah, but now they're going to experience his glory. You can know a meal is going to be good, but the taste test lets you experience what you think you know. So the disciples will get a glimpse of glory. They're going to see the glory of Jesus. So here's how we're going to work through Mark chapter 9. First, we're just going to go through verses 2 through 13 and just see what's there. Just kind of work through them verse by verse. And what I want to show you is what the disciples saw, Jesus' glory. And then I want to answer a very simple question. What happens when we see Jesus' glory? So what did the disciples see? Jesus' glory. What happens when we see Jesus' glory? So let's start in verse 2. Here's how it starts. It says, after 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James, and John and led them up a high mountain by themselves to be alone. He was transfigured in front of them. All right, 6 days have gone by since Peter confessed Jesus as the Messiah. We saw that earlier in chapter 8. And then immediately Jesus says, hey, I must suffer, and the kind of disciples I have must do the same. That has sat with the disciples now for 6 days. So at this point in verse 2, Jesus takes the inner circle up a mountain, Peter, James, and John, and just the three of them with Jesus alone on the top of the mountain observe Jesus transfigured. What did that look like? Verse 3. His clothes became dazzling, extremely white, as no launderer on earth could whiten them. So Jesus is pure white. He's dazzling, shining light. That word transfigure in the Greek kind of gives us our word metamorphosis. It's the same word that we get metamorphosis from, a caterpillar turning into a butterfly. So Jesus changes in front of their eyes. Now, what changed? Did his nature change? What changed about Jesus? Well, think about the line from Hark the Herald Angels Sing. I know, 2 Christmas references already. October 5th. We're getting crazy. You can't. Too soon. Not according to Natalie. She'd be good celebrating Christmas already. Think about the line from Hark the Herald Angels Sing. It says, offspring of the virgin's womb, veiled in flesh the Godhead see. Hail the incarnate deity. What is Charles Wesley saying? Veiled in flesh. See, Jesus was both fully man and fully God, yet his deity was veiled in flesh. What does that mean then when it says he transfigured? It means he unveiled his glory, his deity. He wasn't changing nature. He was just allowing his God nature to be seen by the disciples. So they were seeing his glory. Now notice, because of glory, Jesus is dazzling. He's shining. In Matthew, it says that his face was actually emitting light. So he's dazzling. Now, why is that significant? Well, there was somebody else in the Bible who had an experience, an encounter with glory, and their face was also shining. They were emitting, you could say, light. And that was Moses in Exodus 33. In verse 18, Moses says, hey, God, let me get a glimpse of your glory. And so God takes him up to the mountain, hides him in the cleft, and he passes by him. And at the last second, Moses gets a glimpse of kind of the backside of God's glory. And it was such a powerful encounter that Moses' face was shining. He comes off the mountain, and his face was shining so brightly he had to put a veil on it. Now, here's what was going on with Moses. He was reflecting the light of God's glory. It's like the moon and the sun. The moon does not emit light. The light we see from the moon is just a reflection of the sun's light. Moses, when his face is shining, was just a reflection. But what do we have in Jesus right here? He himself is dazzling. He himself is emitting light. He's not like the moon. It says Jesus himself was dazzling. Jesus isn't a reflection of glory. He is glorious. Then the experience continues. Look at verse 4. Elijah appeared to them with Moses, and they were talking with Jesus. Elijah and Moses are two Old Testament figures who were very prominent. They are long gone at this point, but they come and they appear in this scene. Why? Well, there's a couple reasons why Moses and Elijah are showing up. First, R.C. Sproul points out that they represent the law and the prophets. Moses the law, Elijah the prophets. And their presence in this scene is showing that Jesus is the fulfillment of all the promises that are in the law and prophets about himself. Second, in Malachi 4, there is a promise of a Messiah. And in Malachi 4, it connects Moses and Elijah, and it says, hey, listen to Moses' instruction, and then I'm going to send an Elijah ahead of you before the day of the Lord. And so in Malachi 4, there's an anticipation of the Messiah coming, and Moses and Elijah would be present. Lastly, I already shared with you about Exodus 33, how there was another time when Moses was up on the mountain and only partially saw the glory of the Lord. There was another time in 1 Kings 19 where Elijah was taken up to the mountain and he experienced the glory of the Lord. And it says when the glory of the Lord's presence came around him, he took his robe and covered his face. Why? Well, the Old Testament taught that if you saw the glory of God, you would die. So he covers his face and stands in the presence of God. So what do you have here with Moses and Elijah? You have two men in the Old Testament who partially experienced, partially saw God's glory. But what's happening now on this mountain? They are seeing God's glory in full. What they once saw partially, they now see in full. Listen to how Hebrews 1 describes Jesus. It says, the Son is the radiance of God's glory and the exact expression of his nature, sustaining all things by his powerful word. What's happening? Elijah and Moses are now on a mountain seeing the glory of God fully in Jesus Christ. At this, the disciples are beside themselves. Look at verses 5 and 6. It says, Peter said to Jesus, Rabbi, it is good for us to be here. Let's set up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. because he did not know what to say since they were terrified. So Peter, James, and John, they're overwhelmed by Jesus' glory. They get a glimpse of his deity on full display, and Peter says, "This is good. Let's set up some shelters." Now, that sounds foolish at first, especially because of verse 6, where it says, like, they didn't know what to say, they were terrified. It sounds like a foolish thing to say, but it really wasn't. When Moses came down from the mountain after experiencing God's glory, what did the Israelites build? They built a tabernacle, a shelter, so that God could dwell with them. You see, humans have always used temples and tabernacles as the access point, the bridge between the divine and the earthly. Tabernacles house glory. It protects us from glory. But here's what James Edwards, a scholar, points out about Peter's misunderstanding. He says, Peter must come to understand, however, that God is providing his own tabernacle in which to dwell. Before Peter's very eyes, God's dwelling with humanity is present. For Jesus is the new tabernacle of God, dwelling with humanity. What is he saying? He's saying that in Jesus, we no longer need a physical temple, a physical tabernacle, in order to access God, in order for God to dwell with us. Jesus is the new tabernacle, where we meet with God, where we experience and see his glory. Jesus is the bridge between the divine and the ordinary. At this, the experience goes even further. Look at verse 7. A cloud appeared, overshadowing them, and a voice came from the cloud. "This is my beloved Son. Listen to him." The cloud of God's glory appears. It's the same cloud that used to settle on the tabernacle in the Old Testament. And now it settles on the new tabernacle, Jesus. And God the Father speaks. And if you were with us all the way back in April, he says something very similar to what he said in Mark 1 at Jesus' baptism. Except there's an interesting difference here. In Mark chapter 1, it says, "You are my beloved Son." In Mark chapter 9, it says, "This is my beloved Son." What's going on there? Well, in Mark 1, God was primarily strengthening his Son for ministry. His voice was for Jesus. And in Mark 9, he is primarily confirming Peter's confession that Jesus was the Christ. His voice was for us. "This is my beloved Son. Listen to him." And then, just like that, the experience is over. Look at verse 8. Suddenly, looking around, they no longer saw anyone with them except Jesus. Could you imagine what that would be like? You get a glimpse of Jesus' glory, a rush. You've seen the glory of Jesus, a taste, a trailer, an appetizer. And then imagine trying to follow this command in verse 9. As they were coming down the mountain, he ordered them to tell no one. What? Like, picture that moment. You are blinded by the glory of Jesus. And now I'm supposed to tell no one? Well, there's a caveat. Until when? Look back at verse 9. Tell no one what they had seen until the Son of Man had risen from the dead. They kept this word to themselves, questioning what rising from the dead meant. So they're shocked. You can tell people, once I rise from the dead, well, what is Jesus doing? Well, he's bringing back to mind the fact that the Messiah must suffer. The only way the Son of Man could raise from the dead is if he was killed. So the disciples are questioning it, and this time they come to Jesus again with a question. The first time Jesus predicts his suffering, Peter rebukes him. Well, this time they're going to be a little bit more coy, a little bit more tactful. But verse 11 does disguise the confusion about a Messiah who had to die. Look at verse 11. It says, "Then they asked him, Why do the scribes say Elijah must come first? So they bring up this prediction from Malachi 4 that we talked about. Remember, Elijah is coming before the day of the Lord. But behind the question is the thought, hey, if Elijah has come, we just saw him on the mountain, if he's come and you've been glorified, why do you still have to die? Like that, doesn't that mean victory is near? Why do you have to die? Here's Jesus' response, verse 12 and 13. Elijah does come first and restores all things, he replied. Why then is it written that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be treated with contempt? But I tell you that Elijah has come, and they did whatever they pleased to him, just as it's written about him. So Jesus affirms, he's like, hey, Elijah did come. And in Matthew 17, it's clear that John the Baptist came and fulfilled this prophecy. He came in the spirit of Elijah and fulfilled Malachi 4. So he says Elijah does come, but what happened to him? Well, Mark chapter 6, John the Baptist was beheaded. He suffered. So the disciples are hoping, hey, if Elijah's come, doesn't that mean victory is near? Can't we avoid this whole suffering Messiah thing? See, they were stuck on messianic triumphalism, a powerful and victorious Messiah. But Jesus is once again showing them that the path to victory is through a suffering Messiah. That it's written all throughout the Old Testament that the Son of Man must suffer. So on the mountain of transfigurations, the disciples got a glimpse of Jesus' glory. But once again, the only way Jesus' full glory would be displayed is if he went to the mountain of Calvary. If he was humiliated in his death, but resurrected and exalted in glory. For Jesus, suffering was the only path to display his full glory to the world. So what is this passage about? Well, it's about the disciples seeing Jesus' glory, getting a glimpse of it. And they were changed by it. When God's voice came, they got the confirmation that he was the Christ. It left them with questions. They were changed as a result of seeing Jesus' glory. And so that's going to be the question for us. As we kind of turn and say, what does this passage mean for us? I just want to ask, what happens when we see the glory of Jesus? And I want to walk through three results. Three results when we see the glory of Jesus. First, it saves us. Second, it transforms us. Third, it prepares us. What happens when we see the glory of Christ? 1, it saves us. 2, it transforms us. 3, it prepares us. But before we look at those three, I just want to define what we mean when we say Jesus is glory, right? Because we can throw that word around, Jesus is glorious, and a lot of us, I think, would say, I don't know exactly what that means. Well, here's how John Piper defines glory. He says, it is the manifest beauty of his holiness. It is the going public of his holiness. It is the way he puts his holiness on display for people to apprehend. What is Piper saying? God is holy. Jesus is holy. That means he's perfect and righteous, completely separate and other than. Holiness means God is in a category of his own. Glory, then, is how God and Jesus put their holiness on display for people to see. Glory is Jesus' holiness manifested. So how did Jesus do that? Well, think about his life. He perfectly obeyed God. He was compassionate towards the broken. His words were truthful and loving. His life displayed holiness. Think about his death. The cross is the ultimate place where we see Jesus' glory revealed. We see his substitution for us. We see his love for us. It's the pinnacle of the plan of redemption. Think about his resurrection. Jesus' glory revealed through the power and victory of raising again, that he defeated death, that he is the victor, exalted as king over all. So what does it mean then when we see Jesus' glory? Well, here's how Tim Keller describes it. He says, to behold the glory of Jesus means that we begin to find Christ beautiful for who he is in himself. His character, words, and work on our behalf becomes inherently satisfying, enjoyable, comforting, and strengthening. What is Jesus' glory? It's his holiness on display through his character, words, and work on our behalf. What does it mean to behold or see that? It's to find him beautiful and satisfying, enjoyable, comforting, and strengthening. So now, our question, what happens when we see that glory? Well, first, it saves us. There's an interesting thing that 2 Corinthians 4:4 says. Listen to what this verse says. The Apostle Paul writes this: "In their case, the God of this age has blinded the minds of the unbelievers to keep them from seeing the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ." What is Paul saying in 2 Corinthians 4:4? He's saying, if you are a non-Christian, you have not seen the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ. Which means the only way you are a Christian is if you've seen the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ. Here's what John Piper says again. He says, we must see Christ's glory. His glory is the epicenter, the engine of the entire Christian life. We must see it and delight in it, because to not see Christ's glory is to not be a believer. The life, death, and resurrection of Christ are the supreme display of Jesus' infinite beauty, worth, holiness, and perfection. Have you seen it? Whereas the God of this age blinded your mind. Here's one way this could look. It is entirely possible for you to know that ribeye steaks taste good. You could have a PhD in food science or a PhD in tongue anatomy. I don't know. And you could know steaks taste good. You could even hear a lot of other people tell you ribeye steaks taste good. And you could know that. You could believe that steaks taste good and yet have never tasted a steak for yourself. Here's what's possible. It's possible that you've read a lot about Jesus, heard a lot of people talk about him. You could study him your whole life and even intellectually agree with everything and yet never have seen his glory, never experienced it personally. Now, hear me correctly. I am not saying that you have to have this completely dramatic encounter, as if a dramatic experience is the measure of seeing glory. Instead, what I'm simply asking is if you have personally experienced his glory in a way that led you to genuine repentance and belief in the gospel. Not just intellectual assent, but seeing Jesus' glory and responding in personal faith. Once again, here's how John Piper describes this experience. He says, saving faith sees Jesus as supremely desirable, supremely great, supremely beautiful, valuable, all of which the Bible sums up by saying Jesus has divine glory. First, seeing Jesus' glory saves us. Second, it transforms us. Right before 2 Corinthians 4:4 and 2 Corinthians 3:18, it says this: we all with unveiled faces are looking as in a mirror at the glory of the Lord and are being transformed into the same image from glory to glory. What is Paul saying? He's saying that when you see the glory of Jesus, it transforms you. You are being transformed into the same image from glory to glory. It's like being in the sun. When you are outside and exposed to the glory of the sun, you get tan. You get darker. It's inevitable. When you stand in the glory of Jesus, it inevitably changes you. You see, you can't look at his glory and stay the same. So how does it change you? Well, it transforms you from one image of glory to another. You see, seeing Jesus' glory makes you more and more glorious. God's ultimate goal in your life is that you would reflect the glory of Christ, that you would be glorious. Why? Because that brings him more glory. It displays his perfection when we are a reflection of his glory. So what does that mean? Practically, what does it mean to be more glorious? Well, think about Jesus. It means that you begin to do what Jesus did. It means you begin to say what Jesus said. It means you begin to serve like Jesus served. What am I saying? I'm saying your life begins to look like Jesus' life. As you read the Gospels, what did Jesus' life look like? That's God's goal for you, that you would look like him, that you be transformed into the same image from glory to glory. Now, that is the positive, but there's also a warning in this. You see, whatever you behold, you transform into. Whatever you see as most beautiful, most satisfying, most desirable, you begin to bend towards that. It's almost like a plant. You know, you can set a plant by a window, and as the sun's coming through, you can see the plant over time bend towards that light. We're like plants. Whatever you find as glorious, you will bend towards. Your finances will bend towards it. Your time will bend towards it. Your affection, your joy, your contentment, your life will bend towards that which you find most glorious. What does that look like? We'll take human approval, for example. Jesus actually addresses this in John 5:44. He says this, "How can you believe since you accept glory from one another, but don't seek the glory that comes from the only God?" The glory that had become most important to his hearers was the glory that comes from people, the approval and acceptance of people. And their hearts began to bend towards that glory. You see, when you seek that kind of glory, your time will bend towards it. Your decisions you make will bend towards it. Your money, your words, your actions, it will impact everything. And so the warning from Jesus is you are missing the glory that comes only from God when you find something other than him more glorious. Here's Tim Keller again. He says, we will be continually ruminating on something or some things as our hope and joy. Whatever those things are will transform us into their likeness. If we don't behold the glory of God in the face of Christ, then something else will rule over our lives. Seeing Jesus' glory saves us, it transforms us, and then lastly, it prepares us. It prepares us. Now, how does seeing his glory prepare us? Well, it prepares us for the path of glory. Think back, what was the only path to glory for the Messiah? It was suffering. You see, for Jesus to be fully glorified on that path, in the middle of that path was a cross. And a correct understanding of messiahship leads to a correct understanding of discipleship. And what did we see Mark's discipleship last week? Deny yourself, take up your cross. That if you want to follow Jesus, then it will require dying, denying yourself. You see, the path to glory for us is also suffering. Listen to Romans 8:17. It says, if we are children, then also heirs, heirs of God and co-heirs with Christ, if indeed we suffer with him, so that we may also be glorified with him. Christ did not get glory without suffering. And Romans 8:17 is showing us neither will we. You don't get glory without suffering. But here's the comfort. On the other side of suffering is glory. Now, why is that? Why do we have to suffer? Well, on the one hand, suffering is a tool. See, God's greatest aim in your life is that you would be a reflection of his glory, and he is willing to even use hardship and trial to refine you, to renew you. This is exactly what 2 Corinthians 4:10 is saying. He says, we always carry the death of Jesus in our body so that the life of Jesus may also be displayed in our body. And then verse 16, it says, therefore we do not give up. Even though our outer person is being destroyed, our inner person is being renewed day by day. Suffering is used by God to renew us, to help us become glorious. But suffering is also necessary for us to see God's glory. Listen to verse 17 in 2 Corinthians 4. It says, for our momentary light affliction is producing for us an absolutely incomparable, eternal weight of glory. What is Paul saying? He's saying suffering in this life is preparing us to experience the weight of glory in the life to come. Now, what does that look like? Well, one of the most impactful illustrations I've heard on this came from Drew Stevenson, one of our pastors up in Minneapolis, and he described a dynamic with his kids that I've now seen with mine. We were watching Air Bud last winter. Great movie. It's about a dog who can play basketball. And Josh is a junior hire who finds Air Bud, who he thinks is a stray. Finds out that he can play basketball, brings him to the team. He's playing basketball. Everything's great until the dog's original owner shows up, who happens to be a neglectful clown. So the original owner takes Air Bud back. Josh is devastated. Josh goes to his house, breaks Air Bud free, but he knows I can't keep Air Bud because this guy knows where I live. He's going to just come back and get him. So Josh takes Air Bud across the river to release him into the wild. And so right as Josh is releasing Air Bud into the wild, he's screaming at him. He's saying, go, go, leave. He punts a basketball up to get Air Bud to leave. We're sitting there watching this as a family. And Jack, our 6-year-old, is so locked into the movie. And it's just this heavy part. Music is playing. Jack begins to sob uncontrollably. I've never seen him cry that hard. Just moan, and then just tears. And my heart is just breaking for him. It's like, oh, this is sad. Everything is sad. At the same time, I look over at Isla, and Isla's staring at Jack, totally confused. Like, she's indifferent, unmoved by the scene. Like, what's going on? Why are you crying, Jack? Why? She is not invested. She is not crying. She is not suffering. So I pull Jack up. I said, hey, buddy, I've seen this before. Let's watch it to the end. So we're watching to the end. 5 minutes later, Josh is playing in the basketball game. Air Bud finds Josh, runs into the gym, saves the basketball game. Josh and Air Bud are reunited. And at this moment, Jack leaps up into the air. And it's like the opposite. I've never seen him so excited. He is flailing his arms, going, yes, yes. And he starts spinning and dancing. He's so excited. Again, I looked at Isla, unmoved. Could not care less. Which of my kids suffered more during Air Bud? Jack. But what did Jack's suffering do? It prepared him for a weight of glory. I do know what some of you are walking through right now. I do know what some of you walked through in our first year. And what I know is that our momentary affliction is producing for us a weight of glory where we will experience heaven in a deeper way, a more profound way. Seeing Jesus' glory prepares us. The disciples saw the glory of Jesus, got a glimpse of it. When we see the glory of Jesus, it saves us, transforms us, and prepares us. Prepares us for the weight of glory that we'll experience in eternity. Let me ask you, have you seen the glory of Jesus? His holiness displayed through the gospel. And if you have, are you reflecting his glory? Is your life a display of his holiness and goodness? It's our 1-year anniversary. And this is my prayer, that we would be a church that sees Jesus' glory and we would be a display of it. In fact, that has been our vision from day one. That vision is even embedded in our name, Great Oaks. That we would be a church for the glory of God. And so today we're celebrating how we've seen that even in year one, we've seen that. And reminding ourselves that this is the vision of our church forever. That we would be exactly what Isaiah 61:3 calls us to. That in their righteousness they will be like great oaks that the Lord has planted for his glory. Let's pray. Jesus, would we behold your glory in greater and greater ways? Jesus, would we see how your life, death, and resurrection displays your holiness, goodness, love, power? That the light of the gospel is the glory of Christ. And Jesus, as we see that more clearly, would it transform us? That we would behold your glory and it would make us into your image from one degree of glory to another. That as we behold you, it would transform us. That whatever things of this world might try to tempt us to find our satisfaction, desire, joy, hope in, that those would fade when we see your beauty, when we see your supreme worth, your supreme value, your supreme goodness. And Jesus, as we behold your glory, would it prepare us? Even when we walk through suffering. We know we will. You tell us that you use it in our lives to prepare us for the weight of glory. And so, God, even in those moments, would we trust you? God, I'm so grateful for this church. Would we be a church that for decades to come, we could celebrate that we have not lost sight of your glory and that you've called us to be a display of your holiness and perfection, your goodness and your grace in this community and to a world that is ready to hear the good news of Jesus. Amen.